You smell like storms, she hissed, her voice low and resonant, a strange mix of curiosity and challenge. Her skin glowed with pulsing aquamarine veins, sleek and iridescent in the flickering emergency lights of the ruined station corridor. Does your sweat always taste of salt and electricity, or is it only for me? She stood close, too close for comfort, but I couldn't bring myself to push her away. My body was still reeling from the crash, from the heat in this place, from her sudden, disquieting presence. I swallowed hard, not sure if I was more surprised by her height, easily a head taller than me, or by the faint hum that seemed to radiate from her body, like some living generator of energy. My name's Cade. I'm human, though that fact seemed almost mundane compared to the alien creature who had pinned me with those swirling, mercurial eyes. She repeated her question without words, just a slow tilt of her head and a taste of the air as if it carried my scent. Something burned in my chest, a strange concoction of discomfort and fascination. I'd never been this close to one of her species before. In the far reaches of the galaxy, we hear stories of luminescent exiles living in the labyrinth of half-terraformed outposts, rumors that they're fierce, cunning, and deeply protective of their own kind. Yet, standing here in the shattered corridor with its half-lit screens and broken wires, I felt like the intruder in her territory. Technically, I was a pilot by trade and a scavenger by necessity. I'd landed my battered craft on this drifting station to strip it for salvage. The place was derelict, or so I'd assumed, until she appeared, sliding out from behind broken steel beams. Then she tasted the sweat trickling down my neck. In one fleeting motion, her elongated tongue flicked out and grazed my skin. A bright spark jolted through me, equal parts embarrassment and a bizarre rush of adrenaline. I jerked away, heart pounding. She stared into my eyes, lips parted as though savoring some new and thrilling discovery. It was an intimacy I hadn't asked for. "Who are you?" I asked, hating how my voice cracked. "And what do you mean by tasting me?" My attempt to sound strong faltered under the weight of her unwavering gaze. She gave a slight curve to her mouth that might have been a smile, or a sneer, impossible to tell. "You carry the essence of storms," she murmured, as if tasting each word on her tongue. "My name is Helari." Her voice made my spine tingle. It was like a chord plucked from some alien instrument, shimmering with resonance. "This station is not safe for you, Cade." She pronounced my name carefully, as though it were a secret incantation. "But it is not entirely safe for me, either." I found myself glancing around the dark corridor, half expecting some mechanical threat or rogue scavenger to jump out at us. Instead, all I saw were shards of broken paneling, the faint glow of failing emergency lights, and the ghostly flicker of an open hatch at the far end. Helari turned her head that way, eyes narrowing. "There are watchers. I feel them. Corporate mercenaries, perhaps. Or slavers. They want what remains in the station vaults. They've come for the same reason you have, to steal from the bones of a forgotten era." I bristled at the word steal, but couldn't deny that salvage was salvage. My own moral code was flexible enough that I didn't correct her. Instead, I said, "Then maybe we should move." She offered a curt nod, an invitation for me to follow. The corridor led us through a labyrinth of battered infrastructure, though Helari seemed to know exactly how to navigate the half-collapsed passages. Occasionally, she'd slow to a halt, eyes glowing as she listened for movement ahead. Each time her fin-like ears stood erect and quivered slightly, I felt a ripple of tension roll through my chest. The strange hush of the station pressed in on me, amplified by her presence. I could hear my own breath, ragged, uncertain, as we slipped deeper into the station's heart. I wondered if she could smell the sweat on my skin. Wondered if that taste of me was still lingering on her tongue. We soon entered a wide, echoing chamber strewn with overturned crates and old, rusted scaffolding. A broken sign above read "Docking Baby" in chipped letters. The roof overhead was cracked enough that a dull starry glow filtered through, casting fleeting patterns across Helari's scaled features. She paused, gesturing for me to keep quiet. My eyes darted around, searching for any threat, but all I caught were the remains of some long-abandoned operation. She touched my shoulder without warning. Her slender fingers cooled despite the heat that radiated from her body. I stiffened. She tilted her head, indicating a side passage. "We can hide there," she whispered. "They'll sweep the open floors soon." Her voice carried an undercurrent of urgency now. We crouched behind a half-collapsed wall. She pressed her body close to mine in the cramped space, a press of scales and warmth. My pulse hammered. She smelled faintly of some exotic spice, and there was a subtle electrical tingle that made the hair on my arms rise. My awareness of her was too sharp, almost painful. Embarrassment warred with a strange, undeniable attraction. Neither of us spoke as we waited, hearts pounding. Then faint footfalls approached, accompanied by metallic clinks, heavy boots on steel flooring. Corporate mercenaries or slavers, as she'd guessed. We were in real danger. My training told me to keep silent, but my mind screamed with 1,000 questions. What did these people want? Could I outrun them? And what the hell was I doing pressed up against this alien woman who just sampled my sweat like it was some delicacy? Helaria's breath ghosted over my ear as she exhaled slowly. The tension in her body was palpable, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I sensed she was prepared to defend herself, and me, if necessary. That realization unsettled me. Why would she care about my safety at all? Had I unwittingly stumbled into some bigger conflict that demanded allies? My skin prickled as we listened to the intruders searching the area. "We'll flush out any strays," a rough voice said in the distance. "Sector by sector." I clenched my fists, every muscle taut. If they found us, we'd have no choice but to fight or run for our lives. My eyes flicked over to Helari. She gave me a single nod. There was a kinship in that glance, a shared understanding that we were in this together, at least for now. The footsteps receded after an agonizing minute. We stayed motionless for another minute. Finally, she eased away from me, pressing a palm lightly to my chest to signal that we should move. That brief contact reignited the warmth between us, and I wasn't sure if it was purely fear or if something else stirred in me. Without a word, we slipped from our hiding place and continued through the ruined docking bay. She took the lead, her scaled legs moving with an uncanny grace. Occasionally, she'd glance back to ensure I was following. I half expected some sarcastic remark, but she was silent, all business. I found myself grateful for that. My pulse was still thrumming with the near discovery, and I needed a moment to gather my thoughts. We navigated a maze of narrow passages, and at each turn, the station's decrepit state became more apparent. Stripped wires dangled, vents hissed stale air, and sporadic flickers of overhead lights offered just enough illumination to avoid smashing into walls. Eventually, we emerged into a smaller corridor that terminated in a sealed door. A flickering control panel indicated the room beyond was once some kind of secure storage or lab. Helari pressed her palm against the keypad. It sparked and refused to open. She muttered something in her own language, words rolling off her tongue in a melody of frustration. I reached for a tool at my belt, a portable system hacker. She watched with interest as I pried open the panel and fiddled with the wiring inside. All the while, I felt her gaze linger on my jaw, my hands, the sweat trickling down my neck. When the door finally slid open with a groan, I exhaled with relief, stepping in first to ensure the space was empty. It was an abandoned science bay. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Strange tanks lined the walls, their contents long since evaporated or decayed. Faint luminescent patterns glowed on some of the machinery, technology from an era that preceded me. At the center stood a metal table with restraints, and seeing those made my stomach clench. Helari brushed past me, her eyes sweeping across the room. Something about her expression told me she recognized the setup, maybe even despised it. "Experiments," she whispered. "They tried to harness my people's energy, our ability to bond with certain frequencies of bioelectric fields. They'd capture us, chain us to these tables, test our responses, extract what they could." The venom in her voice was unmistakable. This station was a place of torture for some of us before the Great Collapse. She closed her eyes, and for a moment I feared she might lash out. Instead, she took a steadying breath and turned to me with a purposeful calm. We should stay here for a short while. The walls are thick. There's no direct route for them to find us. We can rest. Then we can decide where to go next. I nodded, uncertain how to respond. Her confession about what had happened here weighed on me. I searched for words of comfort but found none. She moved to a corner of the room, gently touching one of the consoles. Her scales caught the faint glow, shimmering in waves of teal and violet. I let the door seal behind us, forcing the locks into place with my hacking tool to buy us time if the mercenaries tried to break in. The tension in my chest began to ease, though the memory of her tasting my sweat wouldn't leave me alone. Why had she done that? And why had it set my heart racing in such a bizarre way? She sank to the floor, crossing her legs in an elegant motion, and gestured for me to do the same. I lowered myself near her, the cold metal plating sending a shiver through me. I thought your kind had abandoned these outer stations, I ventured. She lifted a brow, or at least the alien equivalent, eyes flashing. They cast me out, she said, voice taut. Our monarchy exiled me for questioning certain traditions. I found refuge in places like this, picking through scraps to survive. Sometimes I defend our people's stragglers from slavers. Sometimes I defend myself. Her gaze flicked to my tool belt, noticing the various devices I carry for salvage. And you? Why risk your life here? She asked it softly, but the words were tinged with an edge that dared me to lie. I shrugged, fighting the heat that built behind my ears. I'm a pilot, or at least I used to be. After the war, there wasn't much use for my kind. So I turned to scavenging. I heard this station had valuable components left behind. Could be sold to keep my ship running for another year. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. Didn't expect to run into anyone, let alone. I paused. You. A hint of a wry smile tugged at her lips. I can smell your intentions, you know. Fear, curiosity, a flicker of interest. My cheeks flamed. Her directness was disarming, but it didn't feel like mockery. More a statement of fact, as though her senses perceived more than I could hide. Look, I began, searching for some kind of neutral ground. I don't mean you harm. If we can leave this place without trouble, I'd prefer it. She tilted her head, regarding me. There will be trouble, Cade. You and I both sense it. The corporate men might have reinforcements. The slavers among them want me. They'd pay richly for an exile with my lineage. The pit of my stomach twisted. Well, I managed. Then we'll leave together. Maybe there's a safe place for both of us. The sincerity of my words startled me. I was offering partnership to someone who just told me she'd been exiled, someone who had licked my sweat like it was normal. But something about Illyria, her quiet strength, the vulnerability beneath her fierce exterior, made me want to see this through. She studied me for a moment, glowing eyes narrowed. Then a quiet acceptance passed over her expression. We'll rest, she said, tapping a finger against the cold floor. And then we'll go. But first, we must keep silent. Your body hums with tension and draws my senses. Calm yourself. She closed her eyes, some form of meditation, perhaps. The echo of her words stirred something in my chest. I leaned back against the wall, letting my eyes drift shut, willing my pulse to slow. The distant creaks of the station and the low hum of her energy cradled me in a curious sense of safety I hadn't felt in ages. Time slipped away in that hush. Whether it was minutes or an hour, I couldn't tell. Finally, when I stirred, Illyria was watching me, her gaze searching. Without warning, she rose and stretched her limbs, every movement fluid and graceful. The shape of her hips, the lines of her torso, the subtle glow beneath her scales, my eyes were drawn to each detail. In that moment, she looked more alive than anything I'd known in months. We can't linger, she murmured. The Watchers will eventually find us. She extended a hand. I took it, feeling a jolt where our skin met. She gave a half-smile, reading the flicker in my eyes. Come. If we're to escape, we need to retrieve something from the vault. Then we'll find your ship, if it still works. And I. She paused, a sudden flush crossing her cheeks. I will not be captured. We moved back into the corridor, more cautiously this time. My senses were sharper, my mind racing with a mixture of fear and something else. It wasn't just survival that drove me forward. It was the promise of answers, about her, about this station's secrets, about the electricity that flared whenever we drew too close. I knew we had to be fast. The air felt too still, weighted with danger. Illyria led the way, her steps noiseless except for the faintest whisper of scales against metal. I trailed behind, scanning the shadows. Occasionally, I'd catch the faint scent of her skin and feel that low buzz in my chest. I cursed under my breath for letting my thoughts wander at a time like this. Eventually, we reached an intersection of corridors. She stopped abruptly, pressing a finger to her lips. We could hear distant chatter bouncing off the walls. I flattened myself against the metal, trying to remain invisible. Illyria motioned for me to stay. She glided ahead, silent as a ghost. I watched her vanish around the bend, every muscle in my body tensing in fear. Seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Then she reappeared, waving me forward. I joined her, and we crept down a side hallway into what seemed like a cargo storage area. The atmosphere changed, a heaviness in the air, as though the station recognized we were approaching something important. Illyria pointed to a massive sealed hatch with an archaic locking mechanism. This is it, she whispered. If anything valuable remains, it'll be here. But it's not just technology. My people once stored relics. She hesitated, a flicker of apprehension crossing her features. A portion of our eggs, before they could be taken to the hatching grounds. The monarchy sanctioned these experiments. They wanted to see if non-traditional environments could change the development of our young. Eventually, the project was abandoned. Those eggs, some were destroyed, others stolen. Her voice caught. I felt a pang in my chest. She had a personal stake in this, something deeper than just preventing slavers from exploiting her biology. She motioned for me to step aside, then pressed her palm flat against the hatch's surface. Her bioluminescence brightened, shifting in color from aquamarine to a fierce lavender. Some hidden lock within the door responded, a soft chime sounded, and I heard gears grind in protest. Slowly, the hatch slid open, revealing a narrow chamber beyond, lined with rows of capsules. Most were shattered, or empty. A pungent smell of chemicals wafted out, and I resisted the urge to gag. Stay close, she said, her voice taut. We must see if anything remains. She moved quickly, checking each row of capsules. Her expression grew more strained with every broken container. Dread pulled in my stomach. This place was a graveyard of broken glass and stunted life. I realized that for her, this might be akin to walking through the remains of a massacre. Finally, in one corner, she paused, her eyes flaring. A single capsule, flickering with faint interior lights. The protective shell was cracked but still intact. Illyria pressed her face close, breath fogging the glass. Inside, a cluster of half-formed eggs, their surfaces etched with faint phosphorescent lines. She let out a trembling exhale. They're dormant, she whispered. But not dead. They have not been moved in so long. A knot formed in my throat. Can they still hatch? I asked, unsure if that was a naive question. She pressed a palm to the capsule, tears of relief, if that's what they were, gathering at the corners of her luminous eyes. They could, she said, voice quivering. But they need a caretaker to bond with them, to provide the right frequency. Without that, they'll never wake. Something stirred in me, a protective instinct I hadn't expected. We have to get them out of here, I said. So the slavers can't take them, so they have a chance. She turned to me, gratitude flickering in her gaze. Yes, she agreed, then hesitated. But it won't be easy. These eggs belong to my people. They require specialized conditions or… She trailed off, glancing at me uncertainly. Or what? I pressed. Her cheeks colored a deeper hue. One of the old ways for an egg to survive outside the hatching grounds is to bond with an adult caretaker. The caretaker's body temperature, pheromones, bioelectrical field, it helps the eggs develop. But it's more intimate than you might imagine. It's not something done lightly. I felt my mouth go dry, though I wasn't entirely sure what she implied. Okay, I said slowly. And you can do that, right? She closed her eyes briefly, tension lining her features. Yes, I can. But to sustain them, I may need assistance. It's difficult to maintain the correct frequency alone for multiple eggs. And there are side effects. I blinked, scanning her face for clues. Side effects for you, or for me? She exhaled. For both of us, if we form a bond. Your sweat, your chemistry, it resonates with something in me. It caught me off guard earlier. I didn't mean to taste you like that so suddenly. But you have a signature that could help me keep them alive. My heart pounded as a swirl of conflicting emotions stormed through my brain. Curiosity, fear, an inexplicable surge of protectiveness. Illyria, if this is about saving those eggs, let's figure it out. But let's do it once we're off this station. She nodded, clearly relieved. Yes, we'll take them with us. She glanced at the capsule, a resigned expression crossing her features. But they're too heavy to carry like this. Carefully, she pressed a series of buttons. With a hiss of compressed air, the capsule's top slid open, revealing a cluster of leathery, softly glowing eggs nestled in a bed of nutrient gel. Her fingers trembled as she traced the top egg. They're so cold, she breathed. They need warmth, living energy. I hesitated, not sure how else to help. Then she began lifting them from the capsule into a smaller case she found among the wreckage, a case presumably designed for transport. Each egg glowed faintly under her touch, as if responding to her presence. She closed her eyes and hummed a soft melody, her scales shifting in patterns of pale silver and lavender. I stood watch, trying to ignore how intimately she cradled each egg, as if they were pieces of her own body. She finished her work, locking the transport case. Then she turned to me, a determined set to her jaw. We must go. The Watchers will sense the energy spike I just caused. I nodded, and we slipped out of the vault, back into the corridor. The tension in the air grew sharper. We could hear footsteps echoing in the distance once again. This time, though, I heard something else, clanking metal, as if drones or mechanical suits were patrolling. My stomach tightened. We're running out of time, I whispered. Illyria gave me a look that was equal parts confidence and fear. If we're caught. She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what would happen. They'd see what she had, these precious eggs, and they'd take her prisoner or worse. We hurried through the corridors in a half-jog, doing our best to remain quiet. The station moaned and rattled, systems on the brink of total collapse. At every intersection, I expected to see a team of heavily armed mercenaries blocking our path. Yet somehow we pressed onward, guided by Illyria's uncanny sense for which route was clear. She'd pause occasionally, letting me catch my breath, her eyes distant as if she were tuning in to distant vibrations. Eventually, we reached a bay that was one step above utter ruin. My ship, a battered craft with patchwork hull repairs and peeling paint, sat at the far end. Relief and worry mingled in me. Could it still fly? I hurried to the cargo hold ramp, motioning for Illyria to follow. She kept the transport case close, never letting it jostle too much. The interior of my ship was cramped, with gear strewn about and overhead lights flickering. I muttered a silent prayer that the engines were still in workable condition. Illyria was already scanning the interior, inhaling the metallic scent and glaring at the haphazard wiring. You live in this? She asked, not quite insulting, but definitely on the edge of disbelief. Yeah, well, it's home, I shot back. She smirked, or did the alien equivalent. It will have to do. We entered the cockpit, and I settled into the pilot's seat, flicking switches and initiating the startup sequence. The engines coughed and whined, but the console lights blinked to life. I let out a shaky exhale of relief. We can get out of here, I said, glancing over my shoulder to where Illyria stood, one hand resting on the transport case. Her eyes flicked to meet mine, a spark of gratitude there that I hadn't seen before. Then let's go, she murmured. Before it's too late. With practice motions, I eased the ship through the damaged station's docking bay doors. A moment of weightlessness, and we were free, drifting in the star-studded void. I engaged the engines, and we soared into open space, leaving the decrepit station, and the looming threat behind, if only for now. Illyria clutched a nearby grab handle, shifting her weight with an unconscious grace to compensate for the change in gravity. I set a course for a neutral zone, an old outpost rumored to be mostly deserted except for traveling nomads. "We can hide there," I said, meeting her gaze. "Regroup, figure out what to do about them." I nodded at the transport case. She inclined her head, relief washing over her features. A faint glow pulsed along her throat, as though her very bloodstream carried her emotions. I took a moment to let the tension drain from my body, feeling a surge of triumph that we'd gotten away. Still, the reality of what we had in our possession weighed on me. Illyria's people's eggs, an entire potential future that could be sold for fortunes on the black market if the wrong hands got hold of them. "Why didn't your monarchy try harder to retrieve these?" I asked quietly, once we'd set the ship to autopilot for the short jump. She looked away, her jaw tightening. "Because they see them as failures," she said. "Illicit experiments that, if discovered, would reflect badly on the monarchy. They prefer the world to believe all eggs were reclaimed, that our hatching grounds are pure. The truth is messier. Many were lost, or scattered across the galaxy." Her eyes closed, her shoulders trembling with a quiet anger. "And I was exiled for trying to expose those lies." A heavy silence descended. I could see the hurt etched into every angle of her face, the vulnerability behind her fierce glare. I wanted to reach out, but I wasn't sure if she'd welcome that contact. Instead, I rose from the pilot's seat and said softly, "Let's make sure they're stable." We moved to the cargo area, opening the smaller compartment where we'd secured the transport case. She knelt beside it, carefully checking the readings on an old scanning device I'd salvaged. Her brow furrowed. "They'll need more direct contact soon, or the nutrient gel will degrade. I can only do so much alone. The bond is intense." She shot me a glance that was equal parts apprehension and an odd, simmering tension. "You may feel drawn to me, or to them. I can't predict how our chemistries will interact." Her words sparked a memory of that jolt when she tasted my sweat, the crackle of energy that seemed to course between us. I cleared my throat, my mind sliding into uncertain territory. "And your body's reaction? That's where this ovipositing thing comes in? You said something about needing my help. I'm not exactly sure what that entails." Her cheeks flushed with a bioluminescent ripple, highlighting swirling patterns along her neck. "Oviposition," she said quietly, "is the laying of eggs typically. But my people's bonding ritual is more than just depositing them. We share a frequency, a resonance, to ensure their healthy development. My body reacts by producing certain secretions, they help the eggs adapt." I felt my heart race at her frankness, the primal nature of it. She paused, running a hand over the transport case. "For multiple eggs, the caretaker bond sometimes draws from a partner's energy. That's where you might come in." The idea thrilled and terrified me in equal measure, a swirling maelstrom of curiosity and taboo. But I saw the earnestness in her eyes, the desperation to keep these unborn lives safe. "I'll do whatever I can," I said quietly. She offered a shaky smile. "We'll see. Maybe we can keep it manageable. But you must be ready for what that bond entails. It's not a simple exchange. It's intimate." Her words lingered in the air, charged with a meaning that went beyond mere biology. My cheeks warmed, and I found myself nodding, though I wasn't entirely sure I understood what I was agreeing to. The autopilot chimed, signaling our imminent drop from FTL near the neutral outpost. I helped secure the case, then headed back to the cockpit with Hilaria at my side. We dropped out of our short jump in a swirl of starlight, the battered outpost looming ahead. It was a cluster of modules, some lit, many broken, orbiting a small, dull planet with swirling gray clouds. It might not look like much, but it was better than floating in open space with no plan. I guided the ship toward a docking clamp, hoping this place was deserted enough that we wouldn't attract unwanted attention. We sat down with a clang. A cloud of dust kicked up around the docking bay. Systems beeped in protest, letting me know the atmosphere here was marginally breathable, but not comfortable. "We'll need to check the place out," I said, standing up to grab my gear. Helari nodded, hugging the transport case to her chest. "Lead the way," she murmured. I lowered the ramp, feeling the stale rush of the outpost's recycled air on my face. The docking module's lights flickered overhead. Exposed metal pipes clanged in the distance, the sound echoing through deserted corridors. My boots crunched on old debris as we stepped inside. "Hello?" I called softly, not really expecting an answer. Nothing. Just our ragged breathing and the hum of failing electronics. We advanced deeper into the outpost, searching for a spot to set up a temporary shelter. From the looks of it, the place was rarely visited. A few supply crates had been busted open ages ago, their contents looted or rotted away. Dust coated every surface, and the occasional drip of condensation from overhead pipes was the only sign of functioning life support. "This will do," I said at length, pushing open a door to a cramped chamber that might once have been a storage closet. It was relatively sealed, with a flickering overhead lamp and a rudimentary console that could be locked. "We can rest here for a while, figure out the next step. See if anyone else is on this station." Helari set the transport case down gently, checking the eggs again. I could see the worry etched in her features. "We need to do the resonance soon," she whispered. "They're weakening." My stomach twisted. "Show me what to do." She pressed her lips together, eyes darting away for a moment. "It involves physical closeness," she began carefully. "Your body's heat and sweat carry signals that stimulate my production of the caretaker secretions." I let out a shaky breath, remembering the electricity that crackled between us when she touched me. "All right," I said, forcing steady confidence into my voice. "Let's do it. If it'll help them." She nodded, swallowing hard. I could see her pulse thrumming beneath the translucent scales at her neck, a sign of tension she couldn't hide. She reached for my hand, guiding it to the top of the case. "We'll open it. Place the eggs in a makeshift nest. Then I'll begin the cycle." Her words trailed off, her cheeks flushing a deep lavender. I felt my own face heat as I realized the implications of what we were about to do. The entire concept felt alien, primal, and yet I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward her, the sense of something shared in the air between us. I watched as she carefully lifted each egg from the nutrient gel, placing them on a blanket I'd quickly spread out. She stroked them with a gentle hand, humming that low, resonant melody again. Then she rose to face me, her eyes glowing with intensity. "Undo some of your gear," she said softly. "Let your skin breathe." I hesitated, my heart pounding, but I obeyed, stripping off my jacket, unbuckling the upper part of my suit until the clammy air brushed my bare torso. Her gaze lingered on the lines of my body, and I couldn't help a slight flush of self-consciousness. Then she stepped close, her own scales shifting to reveal patches of pale, luminous skin. Her breath caught, and I saw the swell of her chest rising with anticipation or nerves. Gently, she pressed her palm to my chest, right where my heart hammered. A spark leapt between us, a soft crackle of energy that made both of us inhale sharply. "Yes," she murmured, "your signature is so strong." She slid her hand up to my neck, fingers tangling in the damp hair at my nape. The closeness made my mouth go dry, but I didn't pull away. I allowed my hands to rest at her hips, feeling the warmth of her scales. She emitted a low thrumming sound that vibrated against my sternum. My skin prickled, each hair standing on end. I looked down and saw her eyes half-lidded, lost in this new synergy. "This will feel intense," she whispered. Her free hand stroked along my jaw. Then, in a motion both shocking and strangely inevitable, she leaned in and pressed her lips to mine. The kiss was unlike anything I'd experienced. Her lips were soft but had a faint electric charge that surged through me, tingling along my nerves. The taste of her breath was unfamiliar, reminiscent of exotic spices and ozone. I let out a soft gasp, my hands gripping her waist more firmly. She pressed closer, the luminescent patterns beneath her scales dancing in time with her quickening pulse. In that instant, the world outside this moment dissolved. It was just her, me, and the swirling energy flowing between us. The strangeness of it all, the alienness, only heightened the raw, urgent quality of our embrace. She broke the kiss, trembling softly. "I can feel it," she murmured, voice husky. "That synergy. My body is reacting. I need more." She cast a glance toward the cluster of eggs, then looked back at me, her cheeks tinted with a purple flush. "We must share this exchange to create the caretaker bond." My breath came shallow. The logical part of my brain reeled, but the more primal part urged me forward. I bent, pressing my forehead to hers, letting our breaths mingle. "I'm here," I whispered. "Show me." Her lips parted, eyes fluttering shut as she guided my hand up to the place where her scales parted around her collarbone. The flesh there glowed with a faint, pulsating light. I could feel the beat of her heart, faster than a human's. She guided my palm in small circles, then pressed it firmly. A jolt of energy radiated outward, making me catch my breath. The sensation built, heat flaring under my skin. Her free hand slid down my side, her fingers pressing into my flesh, coaxing me closer. The awkwardness of it melted away, replaced by a swirling tension that was both electric and undeniably sensual. I leaned into her, letting the exchange flow. She moaned softly, the sound reverberating through my ribs. I glanced at the eggs and saw them glow faintly in response, as if feeding off the charged atmosphere. My stomach fluttered with equal parts wonder and confusion. Never had I imagined I'd be in a situation like this, yet here I was, pressed against an exiled alien, entwined in a delicate ritual meant to save her species unborn. A surge of feeling whipped through me. Fear, longing, empathy, for her and these fragile lives. With it came a flood of questions about what this bond might demand. Would it tie me to her in ways I couldn't reverse? The thought made my pulse pound, but I couldn't pull away. I was too far gone in this electric haze. Her lips found mine again, gentler this time, an exploration that sent sparks dancing across my scalp. Our tongues brushed, a taste of salt and spice, the tang of sweat, the metallic hint of old station air. She drank it in, humming low in her throat, and I felt my entire body respond. Eventually she eased back, breath ragged. The glow along her collarbone intensified, and I saw tiny filaments shift under her scales, like glowing threads weaving in patterns. "It's happening," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm producing the caretaker fluid." Her gaze locked on me. "My body is preparing to lay. To oviposit. But not the eggs you see there, those are separate. This is more like a resonance booster. It will help me fuse with them." I nodded, not fully grasping the biology, but understanding the urgency and the trust she was placing in me. "We can protect them," I said quietly. She touched my face, and in her eyes I saw an unfamiliar softness. "We must," she whispered. "They've been alone for too long." She turned and knelt beside the cluster of eggs, motioning for me to come closer. I could see the subtle tremors in her body, the flush across her cheeks. She lifted one egg, cradling it in her arms like a precious treasure. A thin membrane of luminous fluid seeped from between her scales near her abdomen, glistening in the faint light. My heart hammered. This was intimate, yes, but also undeniably sacred in its own way. I felt humbled, standing witness to an alien ritual. She pressed the egg gently to her midsection, humming the same low melody from before, and I saw the fluid envelop the egg. It pulsed with new energy, the phosphorescent patterns flaring. As she continued, I hovered close, kneeling to help hold the other steady. The air was thick with a potent, musky scent, her body's reaction, the caretaker bond. Each breath felt charged. My skin was damp with sweat, and she turned her head to me, leaning in to brush her lips across the side of my neck. "Don't mind me," she whispered, half apologetic, half desperate. "I need your sweat. The salt. It drives the production." She licked a bead of moisture from my collarbone, and a shiver tore through me. The alien sense of it, combined with the strange romance flooding the space, left me reeling. I wanted to say something playful or flippant, but all that came out was a shaky exhale. After some time, I lost track of how long, she placed the egg gently into the nest, where it rested in a soft glow. She turned to me, chest heaving. I must do this for each egg. Then their viability will increase. They'll respond to me, and the bond will form. Her voice wavered, fatigue already setting in. I gathered a blanket and propped it around her, trying to make the cold metal floor more comfortable. I'll help however I can, I whispered, ignoring the throbbing pulse of desire in my own veins. This wasn't about me. It was about saving these fragile lives. And perhaps, in some strange cosmic sense, it was about saving her, too. We continued this process, carefully cycling through each egg. With every repetition, she grew more exhausted, though the glow beneath her scales intensified. I offered my sweat-laced skin whenever she needed it, letting her draw in the charge. It was an odd primal dance, one that blurred the line between necessity and intimate longing. Once the last egg was coated in that strange caretaker fluid, she slumped, leaning against me. Our breathing sounded loud in the silence of the small chamber. A wave of emotion swept through me then, and I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. She was trembling, her face buried in my shoulder. They're stable, she murmured. But they'll need more sessions if they're to survive. More of our synergy. Outside, the outpost groaned under shifting pressure systems. I realized I hadn't checked if this place was truly empty. We were vulnerable here, locked in our own world of caretaker bonding. But in that moment, none of that mattered more than the warm, panting alien woman in my arms and the row of eggs glowing softly. You need to rest, I said, voice thick with concern. She nodded weakly. I feel like I'm burning from the inside out, she confessed. It's the caretaker hormones. My body's confused by your presence, your sweat, your frequency. I pulled her tighter, kissing her forehead without thinking. We'll figure it out. One step at a time. She sighed, letting her eyes close. For a long moment, we remained like that, bodies entwined on the cold floor, the only light coming from the egg's faint glow. My mind whirled with everything that had happened: slavers, corporate mercenaries, station escapes, a caretaker bond with an exiled alien. And there was still the question of what came next. But for now, I couldn't deny the sense of calm that descended as I listened to her breathing slow, her body relaxing in my arms. The hum of her energy steadied my own racing heart. This was a reprieve, a fragile moment of peace before the universe threw its next challenge at us. Eventually, I managed to help her to her feet and guide her onto a makeshift bed I'd set up in a corner, using spare blankets and cushions from the ship. She sank onto it with a grateful sigh, carefully curled around the eggs as though protecting them even in sleep. I sank down beside her, exhaustion tugging at my limbs. My eyes felt gritty. We hadn't slept in what felt like days. My adrenaline was finally crashing, and I let my head rest against her shoulder. She murmured something softly, half asleep, and a gentle bioluminescent pulse traced across her skin, matching the cadence of her breath. In that moment, I wondered how I'd ever return to the lonely existence I'd known before. Illyria's presence had changed me already. And though I feared what the future held, I felt an odd spark of hope. We slipped into a restless sleep, our bodies pressed together in a corner of a half-abandoned outpost on the edge of nowhere. Dreams came, vivid, alien dreams of swirling colors and silent heartbeats. I saw glimpses of Helaria's world, the monarchy that exiled her, shimmering spires and swaying luminescent forests. I saw a nest of eggs carried through a grand hall, only for them to vanish into cold, sterile labs. I felt Helaria's despair, her outrage, her determination. When I jolted awake some time later, drenched in cold sweat, she stirred beside me with concern etched on her features. "What did you see?" she asked quietly. I shook my head, still disoriented, eyes searching the small room. The eggs, the outpost, the stale air, it all pressed back into reality. "I'm not sure," I replied, voice shaking. "Memories, maybe. Yours? I felt your emotions." Her face softened, understanding dawning. The caretaker bond is bridging us, she whispered. You might see my memories in your dreams. A ripple of unease passed through me. This bond was more powerful than I'd realized. The merging of our energies extended beyond saving these eggs. It was tying us together in ways I didn't fully comprehend. A sudden wave of empathy for her situation washed over me. She'd lost her home, her people, been cast out. And now, ironically, she was forging a bond with a stranger, a human. Does it hurt? I asked softly, brushing a stray lock of my dark hair away from my forehead. She frowned, as though struggling with the right words. Not pain, exactly. It's disorienting. My body expected to do this with one of my own kind, if ever. But the monarchy took that future away. Now I have you. And we have these eggs. She glanced toward them, her expression a mix of protectiveness and pride. It's no small thing to share this with an outsider. But if you're willing, I won't shut you out. I swallowed, my throat tight. I'm with you, I said, forcing a small smile. I might not understand everything, but I want to keep them safe. And I care about what happens to you. My words sounded clumsy in my ears, but she reached for my hand, tangling our fingers. Her scales felt surprisingly soft along the edges, warm and tingling with latent energy. We'll get through it, she said, a hint of gratitude lighting her gaze. I'll just need more time to fully integrate the caretaker cycle. That might require more closeness. Are you sure you can handle that? I let out a shaky laugh. I'm not sure about anything anymore, but yeah, I can handle it. I think. She exhaled, relief rolling off her in a gentle wave. The tension between us shifted, neither purely awkward nor purely calm. A new dimension of trust had opened. We shared a faint, tentative smile. Then, as if sensing the need for a practical step, she slid from the makeshift bed, steadied herself, and reached for the device measuring the egg's viability. They're stable, she murmured. Thank you. She brushed a hand over them, a maternal motion that struck a chord in me. We should check the rest of the outposts for supplies, I said. Maybe there's a med station or at least some functional environment controls. We can't stay in this dusty corner forever. She nodded. Yes. But we must be quick. We don't know who else might show up. At the mention of that possibility, my mind flashed to the corporate mercenaries. They had bigger resources, better gear. If they tracked us, we'd be in serious trouble. My breath caught as worry gnawed at me. Illyria caught my expression and laid a comforting hand on my arm. I know, she said. We'll handle it together. We left the eggs carefully wrapped, the caretaker fluid forming a stable environment for the moment. I locked the chamber behind us, hoping the door would hold if anyone snooped around. The outpost corridors were dimly lit, just enough for us to navigate. Ancient graffiti marked the walls, names of travelers long gone, warnings about unsafe sections. Occasionally, we passed a shattered window giving a view of the swirling gray planet below. The outpost's rotation made the corridor tilt occasionally, or that's how it felt. We found a small control room, consoles flickering with half-dead displays. Illyria tapped a screen, frowning at the alien text that popped up. Looks like it's mostly human script, she said, her voice echoing in the dusty space. Power's nearly gone. But there might be enough to run a minimal climate regulator for our room. I nodded, stepping up beside her to fiddle with the controls. After a few tries, we managed to route a trickle of power to the storage chamber. A faint whir indicated success. I pictured the eggs, safe under a slightly less dire environment. It was a small comfort. She pointed to a map on a cracked console screen. Looks like there's a medical bay on the upper level, she said. Maybe we can find something to replenish your electrolytes. You're sweating a lot, and my body keeps. She trailed off, clearing her throat. Never mind. She tried to act casual, but a flush tinted her cheeks. All right, I said, trying not to smirk too obviously. Let's go see if we can find some nutrients, or at least water. We headed up a rickety set of stairs, the metal groaning beneath us. At the top, we found a corridor with a half-collapsed ceiling. We squeezed through the debris and discovered a room marked with a faded cross-like symbol. Inside, we flicked on a portable lamp from my belt, illuminating shelves lined with old medical supplies. A lot was rotted or expired, but we managed to uncover sealed nutrient packets and a few bottles of purified water. I stuffed them into my bag, relief washing over me. Helari rummaged through a drawer, producing a small handheld scanning device. "This might help monitor the egg's growth," she said, reading the old labels. "It's a universal bioscanner. If it still works." She gave the side a tap, and it hummed faintly. "We'll test it." I gave her a light grin. "Looks like we're in luck for once." She returned my smile, a moment of soft camaraderie in this dreary place. Then she froze, her expression darkening. I tensed, listening. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the corridor, accompanied by low voices. We exchanged a swift glance. "Hide," she mouthed. We ducked behind an overturned gurney in the corner of the room, dousing the lamp. My heart pounded. Through the open doorway, we could see flickers of light, flashlights, perhaps, and catch snippets of conversation. "Think they docked here," one voice said. "The ship logs indicated someone landed a few hours ago." We find the cargo," another voice grunted. "Boss wants any alien tech. Says it's valuable." My throat tightened. They were here, corporate or slaver scum. They had tracked us to this outpost. Helari squeezed my arm, her face drawn with worry. I thought of the eggs, how exposed they were in that small chamber. If these mercenaries found them. Our eyes locked, and we both knew we had no choice. We had to fight or flee. But we couldn't run without the eggs. A plan formed in my mind. I mouthed, "We'll circle back, get the eggs, get to my ship." She nodded, though fear shimmered behind her gaze. We waited until the footsteps receded, then crawled from our hiding spot. Staying low, we inched into the corridor. I could smell the metallic tang of sweat and adrenaline rising off my skin. Helari, for her part, moved with predatory silence, her fins quivering. We avoided the direct path and opted for a back route, guided by the decrepit map we'd seen earlier. My heart thudded with every step, expecting at any moment to run into an armed guard. At one junction, we heard voices ahead and ducked into a side passage. The tension was suffocating. If they found us, we'd be pinned. The corridor ended at a locked door. I hurriedly hacked it with my portable tool, trying to stifle the beep that signaled success. It slid open with a hiss, and we slipped inside, sealing it behind us. We were in a supply room. It smelled musty, full of dusty crates. At first glance, it seemed empty, but a shape moved in the corner. My blood went cold, and I raised my improvised weapon, only to realize it was a half-functioning cleaning droid, scuttling aimlessly. I let out a breath, lowering my guard. "We're near the storage chamber," Helari whispered. "Just another corridor away." I nodded, motioning for her to follow. We crept out through a secondary door that opened into a deserted hall. Relief flickered through me as we approached the chamber where we'd left the eggs. I keyed in the lock code, and the door slid aside. Inside, the caretaker fluid's glow lit the small nest. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the slight shift in one of the eggs. It quivered, rocking gently. "They're responding," Helari breathed, awe in her voice. "The caretaker fluid's working." She rushed over, checking them with the newly acquired scanner. "They're stable, some are even stirring," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "But we have to get them out of here." I nodded, mind racing. I retrieved an anti-grav cart from the corner of my ship's cargo inventory. If it still held a charge, we could use it to transport the eggs back to the vessel quickly. Booting it up, I exhaled in relief as the system whirred to life, its small hover engines humming softly. We loaded the eggs onto the cart with the utmost care. Helari cradled each one briefly, murmuring her melodic tune. I watched her with something approaching reverence. She was fierce, protective, and under the swirling tension of our situation, I felt the tug of something deeper forming between us. After the eggs were secured, we paused, listening for footsteps. The corridor outside seemed quiet, but we couldn't be sure. My pulse hammered, knowing how vulnerable we were. Each step toward the docking bay felt monumental, the anti-grav cart humming softly as it bore our precious cargo. Illyria and I walked in tense formation, me scanning ahead, her glancing back frequently. Rounding a bend, we froze at the sight of a figure blocking our path. He wore dark armor with the insignia of a corporate security outfit, a rifle slung across his chest. Our eyes locked. "Intruders!" He barked into a comm device, raising his weapon. Everything happened in a flash. Illyria lunged with a speed that defied logic, using her scaled forearm to deflect the rifle. I dove low, tackling the man's legs. The shot went wide, scorching the ceiling. Adrenaline burst through my veins as I wrestled him, but he was stronger than I expected, tossing me aside. Illyria snarled, baring sharp teeth, her energy flaring. She landed a strike on his helmet, cracking the visor. He staggered, dazed. Another shot went off, searing the wall behind us. A second guard appeared at the far end of the corridor, shouting, "We've got them pinned, Section 3! My chest seized with panic. We had to protect the eggs, had to keep moving. Illyria whirled, sizing up the new threat. Before he could fire, she unleashed a wave of bioelectric force. Sparks crackled across her scales, arcing out in a brilliant flash. The guard jerked violently, his body convulsing as the electricity coursed through him. He collapsed, smoke curling from the edges of his armor. I gaped, stunned at her raw power. My ears rang from the aftershock. Panting, she turned to me, eyes bright with both fury and fear. "Go!" she gasped. "Get the eggs to the ship." I nodded, pushing the anti-grav cart forward as she followed, staggering slightly. We raced through the corridors, ignoring the alarms that began to blare. Another guard cornered us near the docking clamps, but we were ready. I ducked behind a crate, firing a few shots from my sidearm. He took cover, returning fire. Illyria sent another arc of energy, forcing him to retreat. We pressed on, breath ragged, hearts pounding. My ship's ramp loomed ahead, a battered, glorious sight in this chaos. Illyria took the cart up first, guiding the eggs into the cargo hold. I hung back, covering her, my weapon raised. The guard reappeared, calling for reinforcements, but I fired a warning shot that ricocheted off the bulkhead. He hesitated, giving me enough time to scramble up the ramp. The metal slammed shut behind me with a resounding clang. I sprinted to the cockpit, jabbing at controls to power up the engines. Alarms blared throughout the outpost, and I saw on the sensor readout that more hostiles were converging on our position. "Hold on!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the ship. Illyria strapped herself into a seat, clutching the cart's railing to keep the eggs stable. The engines roared, straining as I coaxed them into flight. With a sudden jolt, we rose off the docking clamp. Shots from external gun turrets pinged off our hull, rocking us. I cursed, pushing the throttle to max. The outpost's meager defenses lanced at us with bright beams, but we wove through them. "Shields at 20%. The console warned in a flat voice. I clenched my teeth and swerved hard. The next barrage grazed us, scorching the hull but not crippling us. Finally, we cleared the outpost's range, speeding away into open space. Relief poured through me in a dizzy wave. We were free again, but that freedom came with a price. We couldn't go back to the outpost, and likely, wherever we went, these people would try to track us. We had something far more valuable than mere salvage. In my seat, I caught a glimpse of Illyria behind me, arms wrapped protectively around the cluster of eggs. Her eyes shone with fierce determination. My chest swelled with admiration. "We'll find somewhere safe," I promised, steering the ship into a wide arc away from the outpost. "Let them try to chase us." She nodded, but her shoulders trembled with exhaustion. "They'll keep coming," she said, voice grim. "If they learn about the eggs, about my caretaker bond with you, they won't stop. There's too much profit in it." I swallowed, scanning the star map for a possible destination. "Then we'll have to find a place they can't reach. Or a place with allies. The monarchy exiled you, But do you think they'd help these eggs? Or is that a dead end? She looked away, sorrow flitting across her features. They would destroy them to hide the truth, she whispered bitterly. That's the monarchy's way. No, we can't rely on them. I nodded, feeling a hollow pit in my stomach. We were on our own, drifting through the galaxy with precious cargo and no certain haven. My mind raced, recalling old rumors of hidden refuges, systems where exiles of all species gathered to avoid the grip of corporate or imperial powers. There might be a place, I said, double-checking the star map. A ring of derelict stations in the Helari belt. They're basically outside any official jurisdiction. Shady, yes, but nobody will want to broadcast that we're there. We might find resources. She sighed, scrubbing a hand over her face. We have no better option. She moved to the co-pilot's seat, her expression determined yet weary. Set course. And hurry. I plotted the jump coordinates, heart hammering with both fear and a flicker of hope. As the ship's engines revved up for the faster-than-light transition, Helari reached over, resting a trembling hand on my arm. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. For letting me taste you, for helping me save them. I turned to her, forcing a smile despite the pang of anxiety in my chest. We're in this together, right? She nodded, and for a moment, a gentle warmth passed between us, overshadowing the fear. The ship lurched, stars stretching into long lines as we jumped. Helari exhaled, leaning back, eyes sliding shut. I focused on the controls, but my thoughts couldn't escape the gravity of what we'd done. The bond we shared had deepened, sealing our fates inextricably. Whether it led to survival or destruction, we had no choice but to see it through. After the jump, we emerged into the Helari belt, a region teeming with drifting rock formations and countless fragments of old stations. Sensors beeped, picking up a floating conglomeration of hulls strung together by haphazard docking tubes. I guided us closer, radioing for permission to land. A crackling voice responded with indifference, giving me a berth number. We slipped into the shadow of a massive wrecked cruiser, repurposed into a docking facility. Debris floated around us, reflecting dull glimmers of starlight. We found our assigned spot and clamped on, the ship rattling as the airlocks aligned. With a hiss, the outer door opened to reveal a narrow, dimly lit corridor that smelled of stale air and spilled fuel. Welcome to the Helari belt, I muttered, checking my sidearm. Helari fussed with a thin cloak to hide her glowing scales. She gave me a nod, lips pressed together. We won't stay long, she said. Just enough to find supplies or a path to somewhere more hospitable. We lowered the anti-grav cart with the eggs into the corridor, taking extra care. I could see Helari's protective stance, her fins twitching as she surveyed the place. The caretaker fluid glistened in the partial gloom, and I wondered if the glow might attract unwanted attention. We'd have to be cautious. We stepped into a winding passage lined with vendors peddling scraps of machinery, questionable tech, and exotic goods. The crowd was a mix of travelers, criminals, and refugees from a dozen species. The raucous chatter blended with the clanking of metal underfoot. Occasionally, an overhead lamp flickered, illuminating suspicious faces that eyed our cart with curiosity. I exchanged uneasy looks with Helari. We'll find a corner to keep the eggs safe, I said under my breath. Then see if we can track down someone who knows a hidden planet or moon we can hide on. As we turned a corner, a tall figure in a weathered cloak blocked our path, helmeted face scanning us. My gut clenched. The figure lifted a hand in greeting, but the posture felt off. What's your cargo? The voice was distorted by the helmet's filter. Helari tensed, and I realized we were precariously close to a confrontation. My hand drifted to my sidearm. Just some salvage, I said. The helmet tilted. Do you need a place to store it? We offer secured vaults. A small fee, guaranteed privacy. The voice was eerily calm. I didn't trust it. We're fine, I muttered. The figure lingered, as if deciding whether to push the issue. Then, with a slight nod, turned and disappeared into the crowd. I exhaled slowly. We can't be here for long, Helari whispered. eyes everywhere. We continued until we found a broken corridor that seemed abandoned. At its end was a small supply closet with a flickering overhead light. I disabled the lock, and we hurried inside. The space was cramped, reeking of oil. But it was out of sight. We settled the anti-grav cart, ensuring the eggs were stable. Helari knelt, checking them, humming that soft melody. When she looked up, her eyes shone with exhaustion. "They're warm, but they'll need more caretaker sessions soon," she murmured. "I can't keep the fluid production steady unless—" She trailed off, looking at me with a flush. I cleared my throat. "Unless I let you taste my sweat again, right?" She gave a coy dip of her head, and despite the seriousness of the moment, I felt my pulse quicken. "Yes," she admitted softly. "It can wait until we have some semblance of security. But not too long." I felt the tension coil in my chest again. The caretaker bond had turned our interactions into a mix of urgent survival and pulsing desire. I offered her a half-smile. "All right. We'll do what we have to do." She nodded, pressing a palm to my cheek in a gesture of grateful intimacy. Then she withdrew her hand, drawing her cloak around herself. "I'll stay with them," she said. "You can search for information. Someone here must know of a safe haven." I paused, reluctant to leave her alone. But her gaze was steady. "I can shield them," she assured me. "My presence alone will discourage casual intruders." I gripped her hand briefly. "Keep yourself safe." Then I slipped out into the dingy corridor, anxious to find answers before the caretaker bond forced another wave of vulnerability upon us. The corridors of this floating station were a warren of makeshift shops, neon-lit bars, and suspicious characters. I kept my head down, listening for rumors, scanning faces for a hint of trustworthiness. A grizzled mechanic at a corner stand told me about a nearby planet with thick jungles and little corporate presence. "But it's cursed," he warned, pulling on a greasy rag. "Locals say the storms there never stop." "Storms," I mused. Illyria had called me a storm smeller. Maybe that was more than just a fluke. Desperate for any lead, I pressed him for details. He gave me coordinates, the price of which was a set of engine parts one had stashed. I surrendered them and made my way back, ignoring the haggling calls of other vendors. When I reached our makeshift hiding spot, relief washed over me to see Illyria unharmed, the eggs unmolested. She turned at the sound of the door opening, relief etched in her features. "What did you find?" she asked, standing and crossing to me. "A planet," I said. "Uninhabited, or mostly. Might be stormy as hell, but no corporate presence. Could be our best bet for now." She searched my face, then nodded. "I'm ready if you are." She started to move past me to gather the eggs. Then she paused, pressing a hand to her abdomen with a wince. My stomach lurched. "What's wrong?" She inhaled sharply, the luminescent veins at her throat flickering. "The caretaker hormone surges. I need to continue the bond soon. Or I'll be in pain, and the eggs will suffer. It's more urgent than I expected." A pang of guilt hit me. "Then let's do it now," I said softly. She hesitated, glancing around the cramped closet. "Here?" I nodded, locking the door behind me. "We don't really have a choice. If you're hurting," she exhaled, stepping close. "Yes, you're right." Her hands came to rest on my shoulders, trembling slightly. "We'll have to be quiet." I swallowed hard, mindful of the crowded corridors not far beyond the door. She slid her cloak aside, revealing the luminous lines tracing her torso. I felt my heart rate spike, the caretaker bond stirring an almost magnetic pull toward her. She pressed her body against mine, and I could feel the hum of her energy. My throat went dry as I recalled how we'd fused our energies before. I looped my arms around her waist, letting my fingers graze the edges of her scales. A soft gasp escaped her lips, and she nuzzled into the crook of my neck. "Thank you," she whispered, breath warm against my ear. "For being willing." I closed my eyes as she traced a hand across my chest, seeking the perspiration she needed. My body was already warming under her touch, adrenaline and desire mixing in a heady swirl. She tilted my chin down, brushing her lips against mine in a tender, almost apologetic kiss. I responded, the caretaker bond flaring like static electricity across my skin. Each time we touched, a wave of heat built between us. Her tongue flicked out, tasting the sweat at my collarbone. I shivered, biting back a moan. The eggs glowed brighter on the cart behind her, as if responding to the surge in caretaker energy. The thrill of it was tempered by the knowledge we were in a precarious place, any loud noises risking discovery. Still, the pull was undeniable. My hands slid along her spine, fingertips tingling where her scales ended and softer skin began. She leaned into me, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. I heard a faint hum, a resonance that seemed to come from her very core, echoing in my bones. My pulse thudded in time, and she let out a quiet whimper, pressing her forehead to mine. "It's so strong," she managed, voice trembling. "I can't control it. I want—" She cut herself off, a flush coloring her cheeks. I realized, with sudden clarity, that the caretaker bond blurred the lines between necessity and a raw, budding desire. I didn't protest, letting my mouth capture hers again, deeper this time. My entire being felt consumed by her glow, her scent, her taste. Minutes slipped by in a haze of hushed gasps, heated contact, and the dizzying cycle of shared sweat. At one point, she gave a soft cry, her body shuddering. I wrapped her in my arms, guiding her to lean back against the wall, careful not to make noise. The intensity built until she exhaled, a final wave of caretaker fluid releasing beneath her scales, that alien substance that helped the eggs. We breathed in unison, pressed together in the dimly lit closet. Outside, the station's chaos continued, but for a breathless moment, we were lost in each other, the bond sealing deeper. Finally, she pulled back, her eyes half-lidded, shining with a sated glow. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice catching with emotion. "I feel relief. And so do the eggs." I smoothed her hair, or what passed for hair, fine, silky filaments that carried faint luminescence at the tips. She nestled against my hand, a soft, vulnerable gesture that tugged at my heart. The caretaker bond had become more than a duty. It was forging an attachment between us that transcended species. I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "We should go," I whispered, "before anyone notices." She nodded, inhaling deeply as if to compose herself. We adjusted our clothes, ensuring we looked somewhat presentable, then turned our attention back to the eggs. The glow around them was calmer, steadier. Illyria's expression held a new tenderness as she checked them one by one. Gathering the cart, we slipped out of the closet, blending into the station's ebb and flow. Nobody seemed to pay us much attention, just another pair of travelers moving goods. But I caught a glimpse of that helmeted figure from before, lurking at a corner, as if watching. My gut twisted. We didn't stick around to find out. We made our way directly back to my ship's dock, ignoring hawkers and suspicious stares. Once on board, I sealed the hatch, relief pouring through me. "We'll head for that stormy planet," I told Helari, who was busy securing the eggs in the cargo hold. "If we can survive the conditions, it might be the last place they'd think to follow." She nodded, brushing sweat from her brow. "Then let's do it." The engines roared to life once more, and we detached from the station. I navigated carefully through the belt, dodging drifting debris and half-collapsed modules. Every so often, I glanced at the scanner, expecting to see a tail. Thankfully, no immediate pursuit appeared. Once we were clear, I entered the coordinates, the swirling green planet displayed on the screen. With a final burst, we jumped into FTL, leaving the Helari belt behind. Illyria sank into the co-pilot's seat, exhaling. "That was close," she said, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in her voice. "Too close," I agreed. My gaze settled on her, taking in the glow that seemed permanently etched beneath her skin now, the caretaker bond forging a strange, sensual bond between us. I realized with startling clarity that I couldn't imagine abandoning her or the eggs. Not now, not ever. She caught my look, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You've changed since the station," she observed quietly. I shrugged, feeling warmth flood my cheeks. Maybe. I've just seen enough betrayal and emptiness. Helping you, it feels right, even if it's dangerous. Her eyes softened. I feel the same. Except the caretaker bond intensifies it. I can't pretend it's purely my choice anymore. A part of me craves you, your sweat, your presence, for their sake. But there's something deeper too. She hesitated, searching my face. I hope that doesn't scare you away. My chest tightened. No, I said, swallowing hard. It doesn't scare me. It's just a lot to process. She nodded, understanding. Our conversation tapered off as we neared the jump's conclusion. The ship emerged in a swirl of starlight, revealing the planet below, a swirling mass of dark clouds occasionally lit by flashes of lightning. My console beeped warnings about atmospheric instability, intense electrical storms, dangerous winds. We'll have to land carefully, I muttered. Those storms look vicious. She gazed at them, entranced. Storms? She repeated quietly. Like the taste of your sweat. I couldn't help but grin, though my nerves jangled at the thought of braving that maelstrom. I angled the ship into a cautious descent, the hull rattling as we broke through the upper atmosphere. The wind buffeted us, lightning dancing across the clouds in brilliant arcs of purple and white. Hold on, I warned, gripping the controls tightly. Helari kept one arm around the cart to steady the eggs. Her other hand braced against the console, and I saw her scales flare with pulses of anxious energy. The turbulence was worse than anything I'd flown in before. Gusts slammed us side to side, and the instrumentation flickered. I grit my teeth, cursing as a lightning bolt cracked across the nose of the ship. Sparks flew, the console flashing warnings. Smoke curled from a few panels. Come on! I growled at the ship, wrestling the controls. We plunged lower, the clouds parting for a split second, revealing a dense, twisted jungle below. Gargantuan trees and spiny plants clung to dark soil, battered by torrential rain. Another lightning strike hammered the wing, shorting out one of the thrusters. We spiraled briefly, alarm klaxons wailing. My heart leapt into my throat. With sheer luck, and maybe a dose of skill, I managed to regain some control, aiming for a relatively clear patch in the jungle. The ship's landing gear extended with a tortured squeal, scraping against wet, uneven ground. We hit hard, bouncing twice before lurching to a stop amid mud and shattered foliage. The hull creaked, but the structure held. Panting, I cut the engines, ignoring the swirl of alarms. We're down, I said, half in disbelief. Helari unbuckled, scanning me for injuries. You're all right? Her voice trembled. I nodded, though my limbs were shaking from the adrenaline. Yeah, I think so. Let's check the eggs. She pressed a hand to the cart, relief flooding her features as she confirmed they were intact. Her eyes met mine with gratitude and lingering fear. That was a rough landing, she breathed. Rain pounded the hull, thunder rolling incessantly outside. I ran a systems check, wincing at the damage readouts. We won't be taking off anytime soon, I said grimly. One thruster is shot, electronics are fried. We'll need to do repairs. Helari stood, peering through a side viewport at the drenched jungle. Sheets of rain streaked the glass, lightning revealing glimpses of towering, twisted trees. At least the slavers can't follow us easily here, she said. I snorted. Yeah, small consolation if we can't fix the ship. She turned to me, pressing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We'll manage. You're resourceful. And we have each other. Her words stirred a mixture of determination and weary acceptance in me. She was right, we had no choice. We'd make do, or we'd die trying. I helped her secure the eggs in a corner of the cargo hold, rigging a small heater and some leftover power cells to keep the environment stable. She hummed her melody, ensuring they settled into a calm state. The caretaker bond still pulsed between us, a living current in the air. I felt it whenever she brushed my arm or spoke my name. When the eggs were safe, I turned my attention to the hull. I stepped out into the storm in a protective suit, forging through thigh-deep mud to inspect the damage. The wind nearly knocked me off balance, lashing my visor with sheets of rain. Lightning flickered, illuminating the torn metal of the thruster housing. I grimaced. This would require more parts and more time than I'd hoped. Water seeped into cracks, shorting out wires. Even with my meager stash of spares, it looked grim. As I slogged back into the ship, soaked and chilled, I spotted Hilaria waiting in the airlock, face drawn with concern. "Is it bad?" she asked quietly. I peeled off the dripping suit. "Yeah, it's bad," I admitted. "We might be grounded for quite a while." She nodded, closing the airlock behind me as I stepped inside, water pooling around my boots. Then she pressed a towel into my hands. "Let's figure it out," she said. Her calm in the face of adversity gave me a hint of hope. I dried off as best I could, catching the sharp tang of ozone on my clothes from the lightning. She reached out, brushing a droplet of water from my jaw. "You taste like storms," she murmured, referencing that first day we met. Our eyes locked, the caretaker bond humming beneath the surface. My breath caught. Even here, trapped on a hostile planet, battered by relentless storms, I felt the pull of her presence. We retreated to the cargo hold where we'd set up a small living area. The eggs glowed softly, responding to Hilaria's nearness. My body ached from the crash landing, but a surge of warmth filled me at her closeness. I realized I wanted her, not just in the caretaker sense, but as a partner, a friend, someone to share these impossible moments with. She seemed to sense it, her luminous eyes sliding over my face. "We'll be here for a while," she said softly. "We'll have to survive together. Keep them alive." I nodded, heart thrumming. "I know." I sank onto a crate, wiping sweat from my forehead, though the temperature in the ship was rapidly cooling. The outside air was near freezing, the storm's rage unrelenting. She joined me, laying a hand on my thigh, the simple gesture sending a jolt through me. For a moment neither of us spoke. The roar of the storm outside filled the silence, thunder rolling overhead. Then, tentatively, I wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her closer. "We're stuck here, but at least we're alive," I said. "I'm grateful for that much." She dipped her head, pressing her forehead to mine. Her lips brushed my cheek in a quiet acknowledgement of the bond we shared. My skin prickled at the contact, a familiar crackle of energy passing between us. The caretaker fluid might not have been called for right now, but the intimacy we'd built was undeniable. "I want you to know," she whispered, "that despite how we met, despite the caretaker bond, I see you, Cade, as more than just a source of sweat. You risked everything for me, for them." I felt my chest tighten with emotion I hadn't let myself feel in years. "Hilaria," I began, voice thick. "I've been drifting for so long, searching for something, anything, to give me a reason to keep going. And then you showed up. I don't regret any of this." Her lips curled into a gentle smile. She tucked a strand of my damp hair behind my ear. We stayed like that, lost in each other's gaze, letting the outside storm rage without interfering. A sudden pang of hunger reminded me we hadn't eaten in hours, maybe longer. I pulled away, reluctant, but necessity beckoned. "We should see what rations we have," I said. She nodded, following me to the small galley area. We rummaged through supplies, finding enough to cobble together a meal of protein bars, dried fruit, and some rehydrated stew. Not exactly gourmet, but it would keep us alive. As we ate, huddled in the glow of a portable lamp, Hilaria asked quietly, "Have you ever been in a bomb like this before?" I choked on the stew, letting out a humorless laugh. "No. I've been in a few short-lived flings with humans, but nothing like this." "You?" She shook her head, a wry smile on her lips. "My people have courting rituals, yes, but caretaker bonds are rare, and typically only performed in a controlled environment. Even then, it's usually between mates who've been approved by the monarchy. I've never done anything like this." She gazed at me, vulnerability plain. "It's new for me, too. And it's stronger than I expected." A half laugh escaped me, softened by the weight of her honesty. "Same here," I admitted. "It's terrifying, but also exhilarating." I feel you in my mind sometimes, like your memories slip into my dreams. She nodded, hugging her knees. It goes both ways. I've seen flashes of your past, bits of your life before. Your disappointment, your sense of betrayal from the war. I'm sorry. A pang of old wounds flared in my chest. I wasn't used to people seeing that side of me. Yet, with her, it felt oddly okay. It's not your fault, I said softly. But thanks for understanding. We finished eating in silence, the conversation weighed by confessions that hovered just beneath the surface. Eventually, we cleaned up and checked on the eggs again. Hilaria hummed her soft tune, and I watched the eggs respond with gentle pulses of light. She was glowing too, though it might have been the reflection of the caretaker bond. Something about the scene, her protective stance, the storm raging outside, the battered ship, seemed almost surreal. I could have never predicted my life would lead here. Yet I felt more alive than I had in years. Night fell outside, not that we could see the sun through the raging clouds. Exhaustion overwhelmed us once more. We unrolled bedding near the eggs, wanting to keep them close in case of emergency. As we lay down, the ship shuddered under a particularly vicious gust of wind. I tensed, but Illyria slid an arm around me. It's all right, she whispered. We'll endure. I turned to face her, the faint lamp illuminating the gentle curves of her face, the shimmer of her scales. It's strange, I said, voice hushed. I'm used to storms terrifying me. But with you here, it feels less scary. She gave a sleepy smile, curling closer. Good, she murmured. Maybe that's part of my gift to you, Cade. Ease in the face of chaos. We drifted off to the lullaby of the storm's fury, our bodies entwined. That night my dreams were awash with swirling color, phantom lightning, and hints of an alien kingdom. I saw glimpses of a younger Illyria, clinging to a regal figure who brushed her away with cold indifference. I felt the raw sting of her exile, the heartbreak that came from being cast out. I jolted awake at some point, heart pounding, tears burning my eyes. Illyria stirred beside me, her hand finding mine. She didn't ask what I'd seen. Maybe she already knew. We lay in silence, letting the storm fill the void. Over the next few days, we settled into a pattern of survival. By day, I worked on the thruster, scavenging parts from compartments in the ship. I braved the storm in short bursts, trying to patch the hull with whatever scrap metal I could find from debris outside. The planet was unforgiving, thunder constantly roared, torrential rain battered me, and the threat of lightning strikes was ever present. By night, we'd share caretaker sessions for the eggs. The bond between us grew deeper. We'd strip away layers of clothing, press skin to scale, letting our sweat and her alien energy mingle. Each time, the eggs glowed brighter, their life signs stabilizing further. Our connection left us breathless, craving each other's touch beyond the caretaker necessity. Sometimes, it spilled into gentle kisses, exploring hands, whispered confessions of longing. We kept it within reason, mindful that the bond itself was fueling so much of this urgency. But neither of us could deny that something more was blossoming. On the fourth day, the storms cleared for a brief window. I ventured out to search for more scrap along the perimeter. As I stepped into the dripping jungle, the air thick with humidity, I noticed massive, broad-leafed plants glistening under watery sunlight. The ground squelched beneath my boots. A strange quiet hovered, broken only by distant rumblings of thunder. I found a piece of metal from the ship's hull that had torn off during the landing. As I bent to retrieve it, a hiss made me freeze. From the underbrush, a creature emerged, some amphibious predator with glistening scales and an elongated snout. My heart leapt into my throat as it bared rows of needle-like teeth. Slowly, I backed away, reaching for my sidearm. The creature sniffed the air, slithered closer. My finger hovered on the trigger, but I didn't want to fire and risk drawing attention from who knew what else. Instead, I tried to keep calm, stepping further back. It lunged, jaws snapping. I rolled to the side, the mud sucking at my boots. I managed a wild shot that grazed the creature's flank, sending it screeching into the foliage. Trembling, I hurried back to the ship, the metal scrap in hand. Clearly, we weren't alone out here. I'd have to keep better watch. When I returned, Illyria anxiously awaited me at the hatch. She breathed a sigh of relief when she saw I was safe, offering a small smile that melted my tension. "There's wildlife," I panted. "Big, toothy wildlife." She nodded, her fins quivering with some primal sense. "I can feel the vibrations in the ground. We must be cautious." In the following days, we continued the delicate dance of survival. Repairing the thruster proved a monumental task, and the caretaker bond demanded frequent sessions to keep the eggs thriving. Each time, Illyria and I sank deeper into each other, the boundary between necessity and desire blurring further. She'd press her lips to my collarbone, tasting sweat, her eyes half-lidded with a mixture of hunger and reverence. I'd respond, stroking the fine ridges along her scales, feeling her pulse quicken. Even when the caretaker session ended, we often found ourselves wrapped in each other's arms, whispering half-formed confessions in the dim cargo hold. The eggs matured under her care, the faint outlines of life visible within their translucent shells. One evening, as the storm raged again outside, Illyria lay curled around the eggs, humming that lullaby. I sat beside her, gently running my fingers through her silky filaments of hair. She gazed at me with glowing eyes. "They're close to a stable point," she said, her voice hushed in wonder. "Soon, they won't need daily caretaker fluid. Maybe once every few days." I smiled, relieved. "That's great news. It means you can rest more, right?" She nodded, but a hint of sadness ghosted over her face. "Yes, but the caretaker bond that links us so strongly might diminish once they no longer need it as often. You might not feel such a strong pull to me, or I to you." Her confession hung in the air, a vulnerability that sent a jolt through my heart. "And you're worried about that?" I asked softly. She looked away, her scales reflecting the shifting light. "I'm afraid it's the only thing tying you to me." I frowned, cupping her cheek to turn her gaze back to mine. "That's not true, Illyria. The caretaker bond might have started this, but I care about you beyond that. I promise." Her eyes searched mine, as if trying to ascertain my sincerity. Slowly, she nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Then let's prove it. Even if the caretaker bond fades, we'll still stand by each other." I leaned in and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that carried all the emotion I couldn't quite articulate. She melted into me, her arms slipping around my neck. Outside, lightning slashed the sky, thunder shaking the hull, but in that moment, we were cocooned in a world of our own making. By the 7th day on the planet, I'd made significant progress on the thruster. Enough that I believed we could attempt to take off if the weather gave us a decent window. Illyria and I spent hours planning the next step, finding a safer place for her and the eggs. Maybe a hidden colony, or an uncharted moon with enough resources to let the eggs hatch in peace. The galaxy felt more hostile than ever, but we held on to the hope that somewhere, there was a place we could carve out a sanctuary. That afternoon, the storms lulled. The sky was still overcast, but the gale-force winds and torrential rain tapered off. I double-checked the hull repairs, eyes on the roiling clouds. "We might have a window," I said over comms to Illyria, who was inside prepping the eggs. "Let's try." She agreed, and I made a final pass around the ship, clearing debris. My heart pounded with anticipation. If this failed, we could crash again, or the storms might tear us apart. But if it worked, we'd escape this hellish place and move one step closer to freedom. I climbed aboard and sealed the hatch. Illyria knelt by the eggs, ensuring they were strapped down securely. She stood, crossing to me, and we shared a tense nod. "We can do this," she said. Her hand slipped into mine, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I inhaled, settling into the pilot's seat. The engines roared, the thruster sputtering for a moment before stabilizing. I tested the controls, guiding the ship upward. The ground fell away, mud and shattered trees receding beneath us. The wind buffeted us, but not as violently as before. I felt the hull strain, the wiring spark. "Come on," I muttered, coaxing the battered craft. We pierced the low-hanging clouds, climbing steadily. A few arcs of lightning lashed out, dancing across our shields, but the modifications I'd cobbled together held, diffusing the charge. Slowly, painfully, we ascended above the cloud layer into calmer air. Stars glimmered overhead, and the swirling storm spread beneath us like a turbulent ocean. A ragged cheer escaped my throat, relief mingling with exhaustion. I set a course away from the planet, half expecting the engines to fail at any second. But they held, and we soon found ourselves back among the stars, the ship rattling but functional. Illyria clasped my hand, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it," she murmured. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Yeah, we did." As we left orbit, I scanned for any sign of pursuit. The sensors were mercifully clear. It seemed for now, at least, we were free. My mind buzzed with possibilities, traveling to the edges of known space, seeking out rumor-laden hideouts, avoiding corporate detection. Beside me, Illyria stroked the side of the transport case. The eggs were nearly ready to maintain themselves with only minimal caretaker infusion, though we'd probably need a stable environment for them to hatch. "There's a region of space beyond the old shipping lanes," she said softly. "I've heard it's home to exiles from many species. Perhaps we'll find acceptance there." I nodded, capturing her gaze. "It's worth a shot." My chest tightened with a strange mixture of hope and trepidation. The future was uncertain, but I no longer faced it alone. With Illyria at my side, and the fragile lives of those eggs under our care, I felt a purpose pulsing through me. We set the autopilot to a safe route, leaning back to rest. The caretaker bond still thrummed, a living presence. Illyria glanced at me, a teasing spark in her eyes. "You're not done giving me your sweat yet," she murmured. "I can smell your tension." A laugh escaped me, the sound foreign after all the stress. "It's all yours," I said, slipping an arm around her waist. She tilted her head, kissing me softly. Then she whispered, "Good. Because I think we're in this for the long haul." My heart fluttered at the finality in her words. "You and me," I said, letting the ship's hum cradle us. "And them." She nodded, eyes drifting to the eggs. "Yes," she agreed. "We'll fight for a future where they can hatch freely. And maybe, just maybe, find a life for ourselves along the way." A comfortable silence wrapped around us as we soared through the stars. The caretaker bond pulsed gently, like a steady heartbeat linking us. Outside the viewscreen, space stretched infinite and mysterious, offering no guarantees. Yet in that moment, with Illyria by my side, I felt oddly content. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.